if you spend an average of 2 hours a day on activities that are outside of your values, and we say that you sleep for 8 hours a night, you have 16 hours a day to live your values, to live with integrity. And 2 hours of that would be 2 months per year of your waking time outside of your values. So if you feel like you don't have confidence, you don't have a lot of self worth, it might be because the actions that you're doing are outside of your own integrity. And so the more you can close that delta between the things that you say you truly value and the things that you do, the more fulfilled you will feel.
Welcome to the Well Worship Man podcast, where men come to build unshakable presence, become the rock in their relationships, and build a legacy that lasts beyond their years. Here, we explore the path to mature masculinity through humble power, daily devotion, and unwavering integrity.
Thanks, baby. Today on the podcast, we have Mike Aidala. As the founder of The Offense, Mike leads a specialized coaching practice focused on developing results-driven programs that spark lasting personal and professional transformation. His approach blends proven modalities with a deep understanding of mindset, helping clients align their actions with meaningful goals and sustainable success. Mike has been featured in top publications like Men's Health, GQ, Men's Journal, Muscle and Fitness, and Well and Good, and is widely recognized as a leader in the field. And before we dive in today, if you're new to the show or a longtime listener, make sure that you follow the podcast and leave a review. It helps this message meet more of the humans that need to hear it. Mike, welcome.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Jessica and Isaac. I'm pumped to be on the show.
Yeah, we're pumped to have you. I've been following you for several years, primarily the physical feats, right? You are the world record holder in the Turkish get up. You've ran these ultra marathon races and also, stand up paddleboarded 82 miles from Bahamas to Florida. So you've done some pretty cool shit. And I'm curious, what is it about those physical feats that really draws you in?
Man, well, I'll give you a analogy, or not analogy, a story from the ultra races or the long paddles. Is that the conversations that you have with yourself at mile 80 in a 100-mile race are different. And they're hard to get outside of pushing yourself in that way. And so I love being able to have those types of conversations and push my own edge and see what's possible, what comes up, and then have a ability to work through some of those things.
I imagine those conversations are different because by mile 80, you've been reduced. You're no longer your strongest. You're at your most vulnerable. So, what does that open up within you, and how are those internal conversations different?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. Your defenses are down at that point. And so it's pretty rare that, at least for me in life, to get to a position where like I'm required to use every single thing that I have. And so I like putting myself in those types of positions. One thing that I don't necessarily, that's not as, I don't know, catchy as the 100-mile race or paddle boards, but that really does this, that I think what you'll find interesting is a vision quest or a wilderness quest that I did as I'm really into nature-based soul psyche type of work as a outline for emotional maturity. And a long fast in a wild place reduces those defenses that come up, and then whatever can come up from that spot is true and aligned with you. And so that was definitely an experience that has its own like spiritual endurance event, but built in a way to reduce the ego, stories, defense, and just let truth come up while you're in the most natural place possible, the wilderness.
Yeah, we love a ceremony where we're getting to the other side of all of our protectors and the belief systems and just those stories that we tell. I would love to hear more about your vision quests. We haven't talked about them on the pod before, and um, I'm wondering how you like what got you interested in that, and also if you've done multiple, like how many days and the difference between maybe like some details about what you've had that make a vision quest, yeah, like get you to that place of the other side of your own barriers.
Yeah, sweet. Okay. I love talking about this. I don't often get to share about questing. So I learned about questing through a book called Soulcraft, which was written by Bill Plotkin. He has a institute called the Animas Valley Institute in Durango in Colorado, and they do a lot of questing out of there and a lot of ceremony and ritual using the natural world as a map for emotional maturity. And I really resonated with that. And even before I actually read that book, now I'm thinking about it. In college, I had a professor who was into subtle energy. She introduced me to a guy, Paul Chek, and Paul Chek is a holistic wellness wizard. I think he's actually out in California, a little north
Mhm.
of you guys. But we did this meditation together in school where you work with the meridian lines in your body, specifically the palms, and you kind of like take one hand and bring another hand and just kind of wave up and down, but deriving all of your attention towards the middle of your palm. And then you can cultivate that with both hands together, and you can cultivate whatever type of energy you want to. And so there was a time in my life where I dislocated my thumb and I really needed to heal that thumb. And so I went out into a wild place. I cultivated a lot of healing energy. I directed it into the thumb. And I really went for this. I totally believed in it. And my thumb was healed. I really went for it in my thumb. I like completely believed that it would work and it did. And so from that point on, I knew that the natural world had some mysteries I wasn't aware of. And so that first got me into, believing in things beyond myself. And then after I read that book, I was really interested in rites of passage, specifically for men, because I'm a man, and the emotional maturity map of what takes someone from an adolescent um, like emotional individual to a true adult. And I think I don't want to speak for all men, but from the men that I've worked with and talked to, there is not necessarily a clear map of how to move through life in that way. And we're all trying to reach out and latch on to different things. I, growing up, latched onto the movie American Pie and was very good at latching onto like some not great ideas of masculinity. But after I read that book, Soulcraft, it brought me through this arc. And so I'll describe it for you right now. It uses the four directions as a compass. And so that
Mm.
you could be like a young child or a grandfather in the end. The South would be really egocentric, so more adolescent energy, like me, look at me type of energy. The West is the Wild West, kind of the dark night of your soul, traumas, things that we are shameful of and often hide. And then the North is your true North. So like what is your mission to be on this world? What's the value and the services that you want to provide to your fellow man, woman, humanity. And then you
Mm.
finish that as an elder back into the East. And so the quest is a journey through the West. And so you go out into a wild place alone with water. At least I did. And there's many different ways to do this through like every tradition in civilization history has their own type of questing. But the way that I was taught by a man, Mike Bodkin, who has a company, Rites of Passage. We did like a 6-month journey before the actual quest, where he taught me some different rituals, some different ceremonies. I got to practice them in the land close to me. I live in Boulder, Colorado. This was over COVID time. So we didn't actually get to meet in person, but he'd give me kind of an assignment. I would go out, do it, and then we would come back and talk about kind of what happened. And then I did the quest in New Mexico. And so, yeah, there's a lot of it's an interesting arc to kind of bring yourself through that where you don't have food, you don't have a journal, you don't have a phone, you don't have any means of communication with the outside world. You just have clothes to stay warm and a sleeping bag. And I had a tarp, not even a tent. And then when you come down, there's a few different rituals or ceremonies that you can do depending on what you're looking for. And I can share those if you're interested. And then when you come down, essentially you have a vision or a direction of what your north is. What is your mission to bring to the world? And then you're held with elders, or for me, I was held with Mike, who's been guiding for over 35, 40 years, uh, in order to support and share the story that came up for me.
Paul Chek and Bill Plotkin are two really elders in the game. I've had the privilege to spend some time at Paul Chek's house here in Southern California, learning from him. And Bill Plotkin is he wrote the book that you shared with me
Oh,
about the four directions
Wild
as
Mind.
Wild Mind.
Oh,
Yeah, is
yeah.
another book by Bill Plotkin. And as you're talking, we're really transitioning from the physical fitness of the first question to emotional fitness, which I know is a concept that's really close to your heart and something that you share with men. So you mentioned you downloaded these ideas of masculinity from American Pie that maybe weren't the best. So tell us about where you were before you started learning better models for emotional maturity. What was that like?
Yeah, that would be really wanting to connect with other guys and not knowing the best way about going about that. And so I was always an athlete and am still an athlete. And so that's an easy way of connecting with others because there's a lot of positivity that can come through athletics, like a shared struggle, senses of achievement, a lot of engagement and flow, a lot of positive emotion. And so athletics is a great tool for people to connect, all people. But outside of the field, like I struggled with finding these deeper relationships. And so I really had three main emotions growing up: happy, mad, or sad. And so all of my feelings had to fit into these three buckets. And if I was frustrated with you or like a girlfriend in high school or something, that would get into the mad bucket or the angry bucket. And I would never be able to properly articulate my frustration. And so she wouldn't be able to understand what it is that I'm feeling. And then I wouldn't feel seen. And then I would walk around feeling like I'm this lone wolf and no one sees me and no one understands me. But the reality is, I didn't have the vocabulary to articulate my emotions effectively to allow other people to see me. And so I started pointing a finger back towards me. But to your question of who I was before that, I was a lot of pointing the finger externally, like, and then trying to switch my different containers of where I felt fulfillment, whether that's drinking, drugs, sex, all three, like combined.
Yeah, I think what you're describing of this feeling of not, the emotions have to be one of three things I don't really know how to express. And now maybe the frustration that I was feeling is next because I'm trying to connect and express myself, but I don't have the tools to do so. And there's no real repair in ruptures that are happening. And the skill set to really build your ability to communicate, it's not offered to us in a lot of places. You really have to seek it or happen upon a mentor or a men's group or someone who can show you how to communicate. And that seems to be, yeah, just like a barrier in, I think, a lot of humans' lives in general, but a lot of men specifically, because if they're with more feminine partners and that feminine partner's like, I just want to connect, like, I want to know what you're feeling, why can't you meet me here? But there's no language for it or there's no tools to process the emotions that are being felt, then both people are really desiring to connect, but there is a miss in their ability to do so. And I'm curious, like, if that you were talking a little bit about brotherhood, and then you mentioned if you had like a girlfriend in high school and difficulty just communicating, but the evolution of that process of being able to communicate your emotions in these relationships as you went.
Yeah. I mean, I found that the feedback that I would get from either athletics or frankly just sleeping with women was positive from men.
Mhm.
And so I was like, ooh, this is a good thing. Let me like go down this lane. But it always felt hollow and empty because as one night stands do. And so I wanted to learn, what are some deeper ways that I can connect with other people. And that started my journey of connecting deeper with myself and then being able to think, what are the things how am I actually feeling about X, Y, or Z? And then what's the best way to communicate that with someone based on the relationship I have with them, the time that I'm having the conversation, where I'm having the conversation, etc.
Yeah. That process for men, as it is with any new skill that we're building, is always clumsy when we start. We have the Bambi legs, our knees are kind of shaking. I'm going to express this emotion that I haven't expressed before. So as you developed your emotional toolkit and were able to actually have somebody understand what was going on in your internal world. What were some of the most helpful things that you learned during that process?
Just call it out. I mean, I'm a big fan of doing that to this day, like with my partner. Hey, can I try to express myself with you? Can I try on expressing some of these feelings? I don't have it all wrapped up in a bow, but I would like to verbally process this with you. Is that something that's available? And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. And over the years, I have learned that, like, having a team of people that I can verbally process with is super important, and not just having one person to do that with. So I have friends, therapists, coaches that I can communicate with that give me a team for how I am handling my emotional process. I mean, I lead a men's group at my house that I call emotional fitness, and that's for this exact thing, for guys to sit around in a circle around a fire, get a few minutes to practice communicating. Because sometimes we need to try things on, say it out loud, and then and then hear ourselves say things and be like, yeah, that is right, or that actually isn't how I feel. That's just maybe what I was conditioned to feel.
Yeah. You mentioned something that's really important, and that's that a support system of one is not a system. Having your woman or your partner be the only person that is there to support us emotionally is a recipe for disaster. And there's this story that gets told to men of don't talk about your feelings with your woman. You need to process your emotions with other men. And it sounds like you disagree with that in some regards, and I do too. So there's some nuance, to me, it's not dumping my emotions at Jessica's feet. There is some skill involved in that emotional vulnerability that you can experience with your partner, and it can be a doorway to really deepening intimacy. So take us a little bit further from that first step of, hey, I'm experiencing these emotions. I'd like to do some verbal processing with you. What comes next when you are doing emotional processing with your woman?
So depending on, I guess, the level that you're at, I often will, coach people on writing things out beforehand. Because sometimes when we get in the emotional soup, it can be difficult to navigate through that. And so having sounds kind of silly, but like flashcards or a card where you write down things that you actually believe and that you actually feel can be a nice reference to come back to. Because I know we're making generalizations here, but often women are more comfortable communicating their emotions than men. And so if it feels like a competition, usually the guy will lose that competition. And then he doesn't like losing the competition. So then he gets angry or just doesn't want to compete in that type of way. And we all know it's not a competition, but it can feel like that if the man is coming from a competitive world. And so having some type of framework to step back and pause can be really helpful.
Yeah. So someone writes down their emotions. Is there a way that you guide people to express them, or is it just getting everything on paper that they're wanting to say so that they don't miss anything and they can stay centered in what they're feeling? Or is there some guidelines in how you support expression?
Yeah, I mean, I would break it down into kind of an easy exercise would be two things. The first one I learned from Dan Millman. He wrote the book The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, which I love. It's a great book. And he calls it taking out the trash. And so sometimes emotions come up. We want to verbally process them right away. And I would say it's often better to take out your own trash. And so write things down, see what you need to actually express and what you don't after you write those things out. Once you've written down kind of just like free write how you're feeling, and then you can look at that and then decipher from there what is the best way that I can articulate this with whoever it is I want to articulate it with. So breaking it down can often be more powerful in the end when you're actually having that conversation.
Yeah. When there's big emotions, we experience emotional pressure. We can think of it as actually like holding the emotions within, and as they get bigger and bigger, they need a release. And writing them down is a titrated way of releasing them so that by the time you bring them to your partner, whoever it is that you need to have that clearing conversation with, the pressure release valve isn't quite as powerful or abrupt or severe because I've wrote them down. I've done some processing on my own. And you're right, the mind is a really swampy place, but just putting it on paper helps us see either the absurdity or the validity of what's happening internally. I don't really need to bring the things that I know are absurd to my relationship. It's like we can set those things to the side, and 1, 2, and 3 are actually the things that I need to talk about that would make this more productive.
Amen, man. And that, that takes time and that takes effort. And so I think often folks are conditioned in relationship that just is easy. It's just a Disney movie. And it's not, unfortunately. And there they can be easeful, but it's also mostly effortful. Like anything else that you're proud of in your life, it takes work. And this is an example of work that can be done that often we don't think about doing. And so when it does happen, it can elicit some incredible results.
Yeah. Yeah, as you were talking about this competitive frame that men will bring to these conversations, I was reminded of a personal experience not too long ago where Jessica and I were experiencing some disconnection. And Jessica said something really like named what was going on. And it was my shit. It was my shit. And, I sat there for a while and every part of me wanted to not admit that she was right. Because if we're competitive, it's like me saying I'm wrong. That's a loss in the competitive frame of mind, not in the relational frame of mind. And so to get over that hump of this, at that time it was shame that I was feeling, and just saying, I hate it when you're right. That was like the doorway that opened up the actual possibility for resolution and reconnection. But that competitive frame of mind is going to stop men every time from actually reconnecting.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm curious on your thoughts. Do you think like if men don't have an outlet for that competition, maybe their work is not lighting them up, not driving them forward. They don't have a physical pursuit that they're like competitive or putting themselves on the line for, that that need for competition will sometimes come out in a close relationship?
Totally. I think men need outlets for lots of things, and often the most accessible outlet for all of it, whether it's appropriate or not, is their closest relationship, which is
Mhm.
their intimate relationship. But having a physical pursuit or a competitive pursuit, I think, is required for men to live healthy and full lives, whether it's like actually competing with other men or it's something where you're intentionally competing with yourself. Like if you're lifting weights, you're actually tracking, this is how much I lifted last week, and I'm going to try to beat that this week, being really intentional about progressing and competing with oneself or others. I think otherwise that energy lives in men and it will find a way to express itself to the surface. And if there's not a healthy outlet, oftentimes a feminine partner will bear the brunt of that, and she's not built for it.
I think too, like for anyone who hasn't had the experience of learning to build capacity to hold their emotions, which is pretty much everyone, unless they have intentionally gone into this work, because that wasn't where culture was, when we were all growing up. It's like the physical practice allows for the release of the intensity enough that you can really feel what you're feeling instead of just like, oh my gosh, there's so much energy in my body, I'm gonna explode. And I think that that's experienced across the board. So besides having an outlet for like the competitive aspect of the healthy masculine, it's also just having like something that helps you feel better when you're not feeling good, as simple as that, so that you can really like sweat it out and move the energy and then come back to like, okay, but actually that conversation didn't feel good. But now enough of the energy is out of me that I can communicate it from a place that is loving instead of a place that's, aggressive or angry or whatever. And it's not that you can't feel aggression or you can't feel anger, but there's a way to express it that facilitates connection and there's a way to express it that breaks it. And I feel like athleticism really creates space between the two.
Yeah, I think it'd be sweet. And I'm sure there are some therapists who do this, but like prescribe exercise.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if you don't have a daily, I mean, so I'm trained in nervous system trauma work through Peter Levine's stuff. And so a lot of the work that I do with people is about this window of capacity of what can I hold without going into a survival response. And what I teach people is that your capacity has kind of a foundational space of dependent on where you've come from and what you've been through and how much work you've done to unwind it, that there's kind of a range that I function at on day to day. But then there's always fluctuations from day to day. And the things that are going to optimize your capacity just on a daily basis are good sleep, enough water, healthy food, and movement, and some time to yourself and connection. It's like everyone needs those things. There's this free course through Yale about like the keys to happiness, and it's basic. And one of my frustrations with like the push for exercise is that it's only talked about as if it's for your physical health or your aesthetic, but it's not. It's actually also an energetic and an emotional cleanse at the same time. And if all of those things aren't on board, if your physical body isn't cared for in those ways, then you have no chance at having emotional and energetic health.
Amen. You're so right. We are learning all about that right now at this program that I'm in at Penn. And so we study positive psychology, which is the science of well-being, and flourishing, which flourishing is communal well-being. And we just did a whole module on physicality and the importance of somatic experiences for people, because we can't, like, so much of life is neck up, and being able to equate neck up with neck down and live is where, I mean, like, everything is an action. And so if we get really comfortable taking actions, then we get to express our lives in more interesting and fun and enjoyable ways. I mean, that goes on, that's like forever. Like the Socrates and Aristotle and Plato, they were all talking about movement and, working with your body in order to get to your heart and mind space.
Well, that's why things like vision quests and plant medicine journeys and these embodied somatic experiences are getting people to places that just conversational input or listening to a book or reading a book can't get people to. It's like you can read books about what mature masculinity looks like and what it looks like to have a purpose and all of these things, and it'll get you to a certain place. But then you go on a vision quest and you have an experience where you actually have to access those traits about yourself. And then you can come back and know more about what your North Star is, like you're talking about, and know what it feels like in your own body to be able to like lead the way and show up and know that you with certainty can survive something hard, which is essential for some of these embodied expressions of all of this stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, you were talking about your vision quests. You just mentioned plant medicine ceremonies. You've done these really grueling physical challenges, and those are all initiations. Mike, you mentioned that so much of men's lives are lived from the neck up. And I was talking to another man, and he said, too many men are overeducated and underinitiated, right? At a certain point, listening to the podcasts and audiobooks and reading, there's only so much that can do. We can't really reach these levels of masculinity and embodiment from our couches. We have to get out and touch our edges in some way, which are initiations, and understand who we are when we get there, and understand that we survive, and understand that we can be named by other men as man, as adult, as grown, and be recognized in that is really, really important.
Do you guys follow football at all?
Not much.
Okay. There was a football player named Marshawn Lynch, and a couple of years ago, he's a running back for the Seahawks, and he really didn't like doing interviews. And Deion Sanders was interviewing him during the Super Bowl, and he didn't want to talk. He didn't want to talk to Deion, and he never would talk to anyone. He would just say, "I'm here so I don't get fined." And finally, Deion who has a lot of credit in the athletic world, said, "Come on, Marshawn, what's up, man? Like, why don't you want to talk?" And he said, "I'm all about that action, boss." And he is just about the action. He doesn't want to talk about it. He just wants to live it. He just wants to play. And so, For any listeners that like football, I like trying to make analogies from some of this stuff that can go, it can be a little bit ethereal, a little bit like head up. And it also shows up in the like pop culture world a lot as well. Whereas there are so many connections that we all want to make. So anyway, just want to share that all about that action boss.
I'm wondering in your process of shifting from this place of where you thought connection would be built and going through understanding your emotions better and these vision quests and these different types of initiations that you've gone through. We're unwinding our stories all the time, but I'm curious if there is any initiation in particular that really was like, "Whoa, I am a completely different like, I've been awoken. I'm a completely different person now because it broke you through whatever stories were existing up until that point or got you really to this edge that broke down a wall that couldn't have been broken down otherwise without this physicality or this embodiment in some form."
Yeah, I would say the first one probably was the strongest one. And I read this book, Radical Honesty by Bill Blanton. Have you guys read that?
No, but it just got recommended to me from a men's group that I'm in.
Okay, so it's super radical. Basically, the premise of it is we all wear these proverbial masks around and we want to be seen and understood by other people through our mask. And eventually that's exhausting because it's not who we truly are. And so, in order to create authentic, genuine relationships, we need to take that mask off and be seen. And so, they outline this process in the book for how to have these radically honest relationships. And it starts with a conversation where there's a bunch of agreements. So, it feels safe in that container. And you essentially communicate the one thing that you don't want to communicate to the other person. And then they communicate that one thing that they don't want to communicate with you. And you do the second thing and the third thing. You go back and forth. And, by the second or third or fourth thing, you're like, oh, that's it. Like, we're all human beings. We all have these like weird things that we're shameful of that we hold on to so deeply and don't allow us to live our authentic lives, or like the lives that we really want. And so around that time, I was managing the strength and conditioning facility. And I really fell in love with the time in between the sets and the reps with my clients and my athletes. And so they would open up about their relationships or their struggles or nervous about going to the NFL or whatever it could be. And I started to really gravitate towards those types of conversations that again led me in deeper into Paul Chek's work, into holistic lifestyle type of work. And Radical Honesty was a book, as well as this concept of shoulding on yourself. And so living a life that you should live based on external expectations versus a life that you want to live or don't want to live. And another book that I read was The Art of Nonconformity. And in that book, he outlines this alternative graduate studies program. And so I was managing this facility. We were about to open up a couple other facilities. I was in my early 20s, was making some money for the first time. Thought everything was cool. I was about to buy this BMW, maybe buy a house. Like, I was in New York. All of the shoulds were like really high, but deep down, I didn't feel like this was what I was meant to do. I really wanted to dive into the heart space that I was attracted to between the sets and reps and conversations before and after meeting with athletes or people when they come to train. And so I decided to tell the founders of this place like that I'm backing out and I need to go do this alternative graduate studies program that I'm going to make up, and I'm not getting any degree from it, and I'm taking all the money that I've have in my bank account, which is like $15,000, and putting a backpack on and traveling the world studying what makes people happy and healthy. That was the first initiation leap that I took and really was incredible. I mean, it took me to Costa Rica, to Peru, to the most remote habitable island in the world, Rapa Nui, Easter Island, to Germany, Austria, living on a glacier, like all over the world. But it really taught me to trust myself and that I am allowed to love the things that I love. And if I go for those things with my full heart, that I'll be proud of the outcome, no matter what it looks like. And I'm so blessed to really feel that lesson at that age. But to answer your question, Jessica, that would be the first like initiatory leap that I took.
Yeah, grabbing a backpack and going solo traveling for anybody that definitely qualifies as an initiation. And you mentioned the book Radical Honesty, and all change starts with being radically honest with ourselves. One of my teachers is Connor Beaton. He says there's no change without confrontation. And I was just at a men's retreat over the weekend, and there's the classic prompt, you're eye to eye with a man, and the prompt is, what is it that you don't want this man to know about you? And that's like the prompts from that book, Radical Honesty. And what you learn, you alluded to this, is that the things that you think make you unlovable, unworthy, inadequate, it's actually not that deep. It is that deep. And it's also, my big moment of this was um I was once engaged to another woman, and I knew that it wasn't the woman that I wanted to marry, and I thought I was the worst person in the world for needing to end this engagement. And then I did it, and then out of the woodwork come all these other people that are like, "Yeah, like I ended an engagement too, da 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 da." Da." I'm like, "Man, so I'm not the only one." Right, right. It happens. And so that process of getting past that terror barrier that comes up when you're about to say some of these things to somebody else, on the other end, there is liberation.
I love that terror barrier. I had to write that one down. It's so true. And like, I think what can be hard in some of these conversations is if you're having something that you want to express to your intimate partner and you're sitting on the couch and you're watching TV or doing whatever you do, and you have to get over that terror barrier that only you feel. And no one knows if you do that or not. Like the world, like you're not getting any flowers. No one's clapping for you if you have that conversation, but your world can change once you approach that barrier and develop the courage to at least just be open and honest about it.
Hmm. Yeah. That to me is the up level of integrity. Like everybody walks with a different level of integrity. Everybody that says I have integrity walks with a different level of integrity. And the first thing is, I do the right thing when it's presented to me. And then what you're mentioning is integrity is actually, I feel this terror. I feel there's something that needs to be expressed within me. No one but me will know if I don't express it. And if I don't, I know that I'm not in integrity with myself. So this real integrity is something that only we can give ourselves flowers for, that only we're going to recognize ourselves for. Sometimes that's tough if we're taught to get validation from outside of ourselves, or it only matters if somebody else tells us that it does.
Yeah. Man, I was just listening to a talk by Rebecca Goldstein. I'm like looking over here. These are my notes. She has a new book coming out called The Mattering Instinct, and she's talking about mattering and its importance and its difference between connecting and belonging. Though I thought it was super interesting. I never had thought of mattering in conjunction with like finding meaning or purpose, but finding mattering. And she breaks down 4 categories that she finds a lot of people answer the question, do you matter? And one of those is transcendence, like you'll matter to God, something greater. One is social, you matter to your partner, your kids, your family, other people. One is competitive, so you matter because like of you matter in a hierarchy that's in your mind versus other people. And then the one that you were just mentioning is heroic mattering. And so that would be you matter based on the level of excellence that you hold yourself to and the standard that you have within yourself. That's what makes your life matter to you. And so if you can withstand or withhold that level of integrity, that helps your sense of self and your sense of mattering.
It's interesting. We talk about, I mean, shame gets talked about so much in men's work, and it's such a paradigm shift to understand that shame is meant to be a motivator. It's not meant to let you write a story about the fact that you're horrible. It's just meant to show you that something isn't feeling good. And in this internal mattering, it's like that's really the part of the catalyst that's going to bring people into their integrity is being able, or this like heroic mattering is being able to feel these emotions. I guess it could be any emotion, but shame's a really strong motivator that when you feel it, are you using it as information of I just did something that is making me feel like I don't matter. Okay, how do I alter that so that I can have this sense of conviction and then sense of integrity that is my own internal making? You know, it doesn't have to be because someone else said something to me about something I did or didn't do. It's how did it feel inside my body and what is that meaning about how I feel about myself?
Yeah, it's empowering too, because then you can take action towards things that feel good.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I'm gonna dive into a little bit more personal of a question. Mike, you've been on this path for some time, right? You've shared a lot of what you've learned along the way, and it's a path and not a destination. So, right now in your life, what are the most prime or present areas of development that you are improving or being present with?
I would say it's kind of trying to juggle a lot of different aspects of my life. So I am a really curious person and I love learning about so many different things and recognizing where's the best avenue to spend my energy and my resources. That's something that I've been asking myself a lot recently. And growing up a competitive person, being a competitive person, I recognize I can't be the best at everything and noticing where am I finding my sense of self from, as I'm in a intensive semi full-time graduate program with running a bit multiple businesses with being a member to my society or member to my community, my family, all of these things like what is enough in all of those different areas is something that I won't even say I'm necessarily struggling with because I will struggle, I will learn, and then I will adapt to it.
Yeah. That's something a lot of men struggle with. There's this analogy of, I could dig 10 holes, all very shallow, or I could dig one hole really deep. And men do have a lot on their plates, all the things that you said: family, community, business, health. And for guys that are just starting out on building a life well lived, sometimes there's failure to launch. I'm doing all these things and I'm not digging any of them very deep. You said you're a really curious guy and you have built some success. You're a leader in your field. And so, how do you remain curious and learning about all these different things and investing in these different buckets and excel?
Yeah, I think it's a timeline thing. How are you judging the timeline of all of these aspects of your life? And so if your timeline of success is really small, then you're going to be failing a lot because good things take a lot of time. So, like recognizing the season of life that you're in, committing to different seasons can take some of the pressure off of I don't have to do all of this stuff right now. This is a season when my kids are young. I want to be a father with my children when they're really young. And so maybe it's not the time to grind on my business super hard. And so I really like the actionable aspect of this is like a values-based life, like identifying the values that you have through the actions that you take and using that as a compass for your own integrity.
Yeah, I think that's a really good practice because what I've found when I've talked to men who are our parents or who are desiring to be a father, and that's a really important aspect of them. If you can get them to make this values-based assessment, then it becomes clear that part of the reason that I want to have this much income is so that I can be a good father. But, like, could you be a good father by being present with your kids more? And does that specific amount of income actually matter? Maybe yes, because of what your needs are, but maybe actually it's like an arbitrary goal and there can be more time allocated to more places based on what the actual internal motivator is instead of just these check boxes.
More millions equals more love, right? That's it. Bigger muscles is more love,
More is better.
more everything. Okay, no, I totally agree with you. Like looking at why do you choose to do the things that you do and do those align with the goals that you truly have versus the goals that you think you should have?
I, we kind of mentioned this. I don't actually know if it was when we were dropping in before the call or on the call, but I'm just thinking that maybe one of our last questions, importantly, could potentially be how, if you feel comfortable answering, how you have built this ecosystem of a blended family, because there are some other men that are maybe trying to do the same. And it's not always, it's a complicated thing to create healthy relationships with a partner and a child's biological father, etc. But it can be done, and some of the things that we've talked about already are, I'm sure, are helpful, such as being able to communicate emotions. But if you have any words of wisdom on that journey because of the seat that you hold, I think that would be really beneficial.
Yeah, I would love to talk about that. So I have a partner, she has a child, and she had a child before I met her. I mean, I guess that's not obvious, but her child was 4 years old. And so growing up, there were some negative stories about single moms. No, don't date a single mom, or whatever it may be. There's baggage, there's stuff along with it. And I really would encourage you to release that story if it's a story that you have, because there's so many wonderful things about being with a partner that has a child. Are there challenges with it? Of course. Are there tools and ways to gain the ability to deal with those challenges? Yes. Does that help you in many areas of your life? Yes. And so I think you're clear. I'm even forgetting your question. Tools to work through it?
Just words of wisdom,
Words of
whatever
wisdom.
comes
Oh, yeah,
through.
I'm trying to be encouraging with it because it is something that I feel so grateful to be a part of. And I was sharing with you before, I was just at a concert for fourth graders, a choir concert. And I was me, his mom, his biological father, grandparents that also come from a divorced family. So it's like multiple sets of parents. And it's really like a blended family supporting him in his fourth grade choir, and it was awesome. There's like 7 or 8 of us lined up, and it's just like hug for dad, hug for mom, hug for Big Tuna, which is me, and then hug for the grandparents. And so like we all have our roles in being able to support. And I think once you know what that role is, or what that role can grow into, it can be really helpful. And you mentioned like those different types of relationships, depending on the child and how old they are, recognizing they're the child, like you're the adult. And so thinking, what is the best way to communicate these things with a child? And that's one of the relationships I'm most proud of in my life, is the one I have with the child in my life, because, he didn't necessarily want me in his life. He didn't not want me, but when I first met him, if it was up to him, I imagine he wants his mom and dad together. He's 4 years old. Like that's what he wants. And so over time, I've really lived on this mantra that it may seem kind of corny, but it really has worked for me. And it's leading with love. And so anytime I would feel uncomfortable or annoyed or frustrated, I would just say, let me just pour as much love as I can into this kid. And like, that's what he deserves. That's what I want. And that's what he wants. And for me, there was some benefits of him being a boy, being an athlete. I could really connect with him in those ways. And spending a lot of time playing has been the thing that I think has really helped bring us close together. There's actually, you can see behind this like paper plate award, there's a flag football team for the past 4 years or 4 seasons. And so that's been a great way for us to connect outside of the home and any perceived expectations of like whatever you may have for being a adult in a child's life.
Yeah. When you pointed out that paper plate award, what came into my brain is how you balance the playing and the performance expectations. It's like there's participation trophies, great. And then winning is also a thing. So with a child, how do you balance teaching him about the joy of play and also about performing?
Yeah. So it's one of the themes of I think it wasn't this past season, it was 2 seasons ago, is the 2 E's: effort and enthusiasm. And so those are the two things that they can control. So we can't win maybe every single game, but we can put 100% effort forward. And if we can do that, then we lose, then we're still proud. And that's a win. Even though it's not a win on the scoreboard, it's a win for us because there's nothing else that we could have done. And then enthusiasm helps the effort grow. I'm in a positive psychology program now, we learn about spiraling. Oftentimes, when people hear I'm spiraling, it's a negative spiral going down, but there's also upward spirals of positivity. And so, living an enthusiastic, supportive life can be an upward spiral where, if one person on the team misses a catch, I'm like really imperative. It's really imperative to me that his teammates come over and say, it's okay, man, you get him next time. Come on, let's get back into the huddle instead of how the heck could you miss that catch? It was right in your hands. We don't have a first down now. What are you doing? Is that going to make it easier for Johnny to make the catch the next play? They all say no. I'm like, great. Let's do things that help build them up and create those upward spirals. And that's led to championships for them. So it's cool to see like these themes in the beginning of the season. Then they win a championship at the end of the season. They get their championship ring, and we can reinforce a lot of those positive habits through the athletic lens that then lead into the other aspects of their life with school. Later, it will be like intimate relationships.
There's a saying about, bad things happen in threes or good things happen in threes, and it's because really of what you're talking about, this spiral effect. It's like bad things or good things aren't just happening in threes. It's like when something you perceive as negative happens, there's a contracture. We're like upset now, and now this contracture makes me less able to like express my gifts or to flow with the frequency of life. And it's just really beautiful that these kids on your team are getting to learn that. And then obviously, like you're saying, it's going to translate to other aspects of life. But learning that as a child is such a gift for the way that they're going to engage elsewhere.
Yeah. Thanks. I mean, we teach the things that we want, right? And so like those are things I would have loved growing up too. But I'm trying to change, societally the way that we are allowed to communicate with each other. And so if something negative happens in your life, it's more common to call someone and complain about that. If something positive happens in your life, it's not as common to call someone and share a success. And so the first question I ask the guys after the game is, what went well, guys? Like how do we do really well? Instead of great game, what can we improve? And we have such a negativity bias just as human beings. It's natural, but you can also change that to a positivity bias. And the research is so strong in terms of these, going to seem super obvious, but like people that have a more optimistic lens are happier, healthier, wealthier, have better relationships. And so if we can have a more positive outlook, and that doesn't mean like negate the negative, there's definitely space for that, but there's also a ton on how to cultivate those upward spirals of optimism.
Hmm. I have a question about the negative spirals. You mentioned there's still a place for the negative or the darkness or the things that aren't so celebratory, but it's not to perpetuate those things. So, when you're coaching this team, here's one example. You could use another one. When you're coaching the team and there is a glaring mistake that's made, there's something that needs to change. How do you approach that negative space in a way that is constructive, in a way that leads back towards a positive space, not a way that perpetuates negativity?
So Johnny misses a catch. He's down on himself. I'll come over. Johnny, what happened? I took my eye off the ball. Do you want to get better at catching? Yeah, I do. Okay, what are some things you could do to get better at catching? I could practice more. Great. When can you practice? I don't know. Like, could you practice with your dad, with your neighbor? Yeah. Okay, great. Let me know how it goes. Like, trying to show people and give them the power to change and take ownership essentially over the thing that they want to improve, and then make a plan of action forward from that.
Yeah, I love that. Do you want to get better at catching? That's to little Johnny. Do you want to feel better? That's to any man
Do you want a
out
better
there.
relationship? Great. What are some things that we think we can improve on?
Mhm.
Mhm.
It's going to take that radical honesty of, in that moment, I wasn't great at catching the ball. You know, in that moment, I wasn't great at connecting with you emotionally. And that is fertile ground for improvement if we can be radically honest. If we can, that's not even being radically honest, that's just being honest, of being responsible, right? And responsibility is the ability to have a response. I would say that that negative spiral of perpetuating the negativity isn't a response at all. It's a laying down. It's a rolling over. One of the cores of masculinity is being able to Okay, you're on the ground, you don't know which way is up, you're covered in dust. The ability to get back up, dust yourself off, to develop the tools and the skills that you need to do that and say, okay, that direction is where I need to head.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, there's again, these things have always kind of been more so just like instilled in me through athletics. Like if someone missed a layup in high school and my teammates got on him, it just naturally was like, that's not helping. Let's do the thing that's going to help because our bigger goal is to win the game. And if he needs practice, we can do it after, but just right now, it's not going to help. But there's a cool study that was done, I believe, in the 80s by Martin Seligman. And in terms of, he looked at two basketball teams. So I think it was the 76ers and the New York Knicks. And the Sixers were a more pessimistic team, and the Knicks were a more optimistic team. And he wanted to study, like, does internal dialogue and what he calls explanatory styles, how we explain the events of our lives to ourselves and to others, does that have an effect on if we can win or lose? And so he took the Las Vegas bet line and took notes and studied every single word that the athletes on each team used after a loss. So after a loss, how they spoke, how the coaches spoke to the media, how the players spoke to the media. It was difficult to get the players to speak to a psychologist. And so he had to just use the media aspect of it. But he was able to show over the course of a 82 plus game season that the optimistic team in terms of how they explain those events to themselves and to the media, were shown to win statistically more games on that Las Vegas line than the pessimistic teams. So, you know, if there's just so many benefits to having an optimistic outlook, as long as it's rooted in reality and truth, right? We don't just want to spit false hope or false positivity, but if it's backed up through action, it can be really powerful.
Yeah, and it seems also like because of our negativity bias, our perception of optimism is a bit skewed. Like stating the facts, like, okay, we missed this catch and also we can do better, isn't really like it's not really that optimistic. Like an optimistic perception of that or like an overly positive statement about that would be like, it's no big deal, like it's fine, it's not gonna affect anything, like no, it's all good. It's like you didn't even miss the catch. But stating that things can improve is just true, you know? And so I think that because our negativity bias is so large, even when someone is presenting that things can change or that there is an option for growth can feel so hard to accept or can feel like so overly optimistic that it's challenging for people. And so to your point, it's not about saying that the negative thing isn't negative or doesn't exist. It's just both things can be true. Humans are quite complex, and I can feel like I failed and I can also feel that there's room for growth at the same time, and I can feel like I made a mistake and I can also know that I was doing my best at the same time and that, there just is an ability to get better after that. That's like forever going to be true. That's like part of the human experience is that there's forever going to be an option to improve on whatever we're doing. And at any of these edges that we've been talking about with all these initiations or these hard conversations, it's like we're meant to meet our edges. We're meant to find out where our weak spot is. If we're not ever finding our weak spot, then there's no option to improve or, for the path of evolution, there's no option to get closer to God because we're not finding out the edges of where we're missing. I can't get better at throwing or catching a ball if I don't know what the likelihood is for me to throw and catch in those specific settings. So I think that that is really that's really an important part of this is strengthening the muscle for seeing things factually, not getting overly emotionally attached to the negative things, and then also strengthening that upward spiral at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, flow states come to mind when you're mentioning that. I'm not sure if you're all familiar with flow states, but I'll just describe them briefly. They're the state of peak human experience, like a musician, just completely in the zone. Time slows down. You're completely immersed in whatever it is that you're doing. These are oftentimes the experiences that people will state were the best times of their life. And in order to be in a flow state, you need the challenge that's presented to you to meet the skill that you have. And so if you think of it on a graph, I often love talking about this with emotions because it's easy to understand with sports. Like, Isaac, if I tell you your challenge is to do one push up, I'm imagining your skill is better. You have more skill than just one push up. And not just, but because that can be hard for people, but like one push up. But if I tell you your skill is to do 1,000 handstand push ups without a wall, that might be too difficult. So you're going to be anxious versus the one push up, you'll be bored. But if I tell you you need to do 50 push ups in a row without stopping under a minute, that might be an area where you'll develop a flow state. And so thinking about your emotions, like what is the skill, the emotional skill that I have in this moment based on all the factors, my sleep and my practice, like, where I'm at today on my emotional level, and then what's the challenge ahead of me? And do I have the appropriate amount of skill to meet that challenge, or do I need to modulate the challenge and maybe develop more skills or more tools, like writing things down beforehand or asking for some space or whatever it may be? But going through life with that constant kind of skill challenge modulation can be very helpful in setting yourself up for those wins. Like, just give one more quick analogy with the sports. With the kid, if I'm putting a kid who's never played wide receiver before in a wide receiver position and then throwing him the Hail Mary at the end of the game to win the game, I'm giving him way too much challenge for his skill. And so he's not going to have a lot of confidence in that position. Versus if we do it in practice, I kind of build those up, he's going to have more confidence and a better chance of making that pass and then ultimately gaining the achievement from doing something that is challenging for him, which then leads to his growth.
Yeah, as you're talking about the difference between prescribing me one push up and 1,000 handstand push ups without a wall, I'm thinking of a quote from Viktor Frankl, and I won't get it correct exactly. But what he says is, what a man needs most is not a tensionless state, but a healthy tension between where he is and where he's called to go. So, that healthy tension of 50 push-ups under a minute without breaking feels like I can probably do that, but I don't quite know. So there's like some tension there. It's like I have to go there. Whereas you tell me to do one push-up, it's like that's a tensionless state. Like you said, I'm bored. There's no motivation, there's no fire there. So I think that's a really interesting frame for guys to explore of where in my life is it tensionless? Where is it too easy? Where in my life am I prescribing myself the equivalent of 1,000 handstand push-ups without a wall, setting myself up for failure? And where is the avenue where I can be called to actually stretch myself? There's a small likelihood of failure there, but I'm going to go anyway.
I love it. I mean, that's why I call my business the offense because you have to take action and you have to shoot the ball. You have to try in order to win at whatever you have in life. And a lot of folks that I work with live a comfortable, I would say, defensive position where things are okay, but they're not great. And that okayness, that middle space, does not light their fire and eventually starts to eat away at the way that they feel about themselves and maybe their life in general. And so I think to your point, Isaac, like calling people up to a bigger challenge, to a bigger fire is something that is understated in today's world.
Shall we do our last two?
Yeah.
Okay. So last two questions. The first one is we talked a little bit about we want to make this work actionable for people so that if the only thing they did was listen to this podcast, they actually can create change. And so based on all of the different paths that we took on this podcast and the things we talked about, is there anything that comes to mind as, if men started to do this thing that you're about to share, they could easily see change in their lives?
Yes, there's many. I'll give one. It's a little bit longer. So we talked about living a values-based life based off your actions. So this is an exercise that I encourage you to do right now if you're listening to this podcast, and it is called Deathbed Values. And so you can close your eyes and imagine yourself 100 years from now with the new technology on your deathbed and surrounded by your family, your friends, your kids, your great grandkids, your great great grandkids, and you're reflecting back on your life from this moment right now until that time. And you have no regrets. You've lived the absolute perfect life. You would change nothing. What would be the things that you did What are the actions that you took in order to elicit that feeling of no regrets on your deathbed? And so pause the podcast, write out all of those activities that you've done, and then we'll categorize them. Well, then come back to the podcast and then we'll categorize them into 4 or 6 different buckets. And I'll call these your activity value buckets. And so I'll give you my 5, and you can, by all means, steal these 5, come up with your own. They just need to make sense to you. Mine are my business and the impact that I put into the world. So any activity like this podcast, that goes into that bucket. My health and wellness, anything related to that is in there. Quality time with my friends or emphasis on quality goes in there. A peak experiences, all states, that would be travel, new experiences, novelty. There's a lot of new research around psychological richness in terms of a map for happiness, which is cool, just like the importance of novel experiences. And then learning. So learning new things. So ideally for me, if I'm in integrity, I can look at my schedule and my days, and all of the actions I take within a day fit into one of those 5 buckets. And so for you listening to a podcast, do an audit. Look at the past 2 weeks. When you have your 5 buckets, how much time did you spend outside of those 5 activities? Common ones that I'll see would be social media. It's usually not of value for people. Video games, it's often usually not of value. Watching TV. And so you can look very simply in your phone at your screen time and you can see how much time you're spending. And so you have to double check me on this math, but if you spend an average of 2 hours a day on activities that are outside of your values, and we say that you sleep for 8 hours a night, you have 16 hours a day to live your values, to live with integrity. And 2 hours of that would be 2 months per year of your waking time outside of your values. So if you feel like you don't have confidence, you don't have a lot of self-worth, it might be because the actions that you're doing are outside of your own integrity. And so the more you can close that delta between the things that you say you truly value and the things that you do, the more fulfilled you will feel. Sorry, that was a long one, but I hope
10
it's
out of 10.
Yeah,
Good.
very comprehensive. And I'll just double tap on one thing briefly is you mentioned men who experience a lack of self-confidence or self-esteem. It's like, how do I get more of that? It's like we have a teacher that says you do esteemable acts to your frame. You act in the areas of integrity. Those areas that when you act within them at the end of your life, oh man, you're ultimately self-confident. You have so much esteem. You're telling your entire family about how great the life was that you lived. They're asking you to put it in a book so that they can come back to it after you're gone. The last question is, who's another man? They don't need to be well known or have a platform. They can, but who's another man that you know, that you respect, that our audience could look to as an example?
Yeah, I will say I'll tell you that man in 1 second, but I will say back on the other one, um, the things that have to feel good for you and what can often happen, and I get caught up sometimes in, is like with my Turkish Get Up record as an example, that got a lot of publicity on the internet. There's like been viewed 50 million times, and people are telling me, you're so strong, you're so this, you're so that. But if I don't feel strong and I just kind of sit back on my laurels and I'm like, everyone else thinks I'm like this way, then I don't actually gain confidence from this thing that I want to do or accomplish. And I don't feel the accomplishment from it. So it doesn't matter what the external world tells you, it matters what you tell you. And I can't emphasize that point enough, because if you're looking externally, nothing will ever be enough and is a lonely place to be. Back to the person, I would say this guy who's been coming to my men's groups here at my house for a little bit. He is a new father and he's a coach and he's gone through a really cool spiritual journey. His name is Ravi. I believe his last name is Rothenberg. I might be pronouncing that wrong, but he does a lot of deep inner work with new fathers. And so definitely someone I'd love to highlight and platform. He's awesome.
Awesome. Yeah, he was the man that you put in on your initial form. So, yeah, maybe you can connect us and we can have a conversation with him.
I would love to.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining, Mike. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
thanks so much. Thanks so much for having me. And I'll say if anyone has any questions on anything that they've heard, feel free to reach out. I'm an open book, and yeah, would love to chat.
And if you got anything from this conversation, make sure to share it with a brother, share it with a friend so that these messages can continue to travel so that a rising tide can lift all ships.